Hey guys, and welcome back. As always, thank you for sharing your time, thank you for sharing your space, and thank you for entering into this conversation with me. It is a conversation that I think really needs some spotlight, really needs some acknowledgement, because it's only very recently become introduced into spiritual practices and spiritual awareness. Although I know from personal experience and from very intimate conversations with others that it is a very predominant and shared experience within anybody, regardless of how seriously you take your spiritual practice. It's called the dark night of the soul. But what that means on a very simple level is it's the spaces in our stories where God doesn't seem as loud, where discernment gets tricky, and maybe our feelings of connectedness are tested, and our ideas of faith are tested, and what we believe to be true are tested. Um, I want to set up some ground rules and differentiate a dark night from a spiritual winter, because though they both kind of sound the same, they're very different experiences. In a spiritual winter, you're going to be prompted to go inside yourself. Just as a tree is in the wintertime, your expressions seem to diminish, so your leaves and your flowers and the different ways that you express the life running through you kind of diminish and lessen, because the emphasis isn't placed on how you express your life right now. It's more to go within and reassess your roots, reassess your the trunk or the pillar of your faith, kind of reevaluate and redistribute your energy, and kind of take a personal inventory on what you're bringing into the next phase, what you're bringing into your next expression of yourself, what you're bringing into next spring. And so a spiritual winter is just that internal journey, where it's not so much about what you're doing and not so much about how you're displaying yourself, but it's more about the substance of what you're displaying, which is a very amazing process, if not hard, and as the name implies, seemingly cold sometimes. But that's a spiritual winter, whereas a dark night actually usually exists within those spring seasons, or just after those spring seasons. What I mean by that is oftentimes where we find inspiration in those winters, or we find inspiration within our prayers, or within Sunday services, or within our meditative or yogic practices, within our ritual senses, whatever your style might be. We find a sense of newness. We find a sense of something new, whether that be being able to forgive someone finally, or new job opportunities, new healing opportunities, new living opportunities, new ways of expressing yourself, new ways of working with your art, new ways of expressing, new ways of being, where we find an inspiration or a wave of grace or something to release. It's very tricky to talk about it as a whole, because inspiration comes in a million different ways in our million different segments of life, or portions of life. And so I'm trying to illustrate that this happens time and time again in different areas of our life, just as different areas of our life have their own ways of having inspiration, own ways of having release, own ways of having healing. So too do all of our different segments of life hold the opportunity for a dark night or a quiet space. And so I'm just going to try and sum it up and make it applicable to all these different areas of our life, okay? So what we find happens when our soul recognizes guidance is we feel a sense of joy. We feel a sense of freedom. We feel a sense of liberation. We feel a sense of excitement and passion and grace. We whether it's tripped by a conversation or a book or a church service, it doesn't really matter. But when we have something new introduced into our systems, or in our ways of thinking, or in our ways of relating, and it's good for our soul, we will resonate with that. We will recognize that. Our soul recognizes things like that. And so we get pumped up, we get on fire, we start talking to other people about this new idea that we found, or this new understanding that we found, or this new plan for our lives, our new ways of expressing ourselves, our new, something new. And it's just really exciting and really gripping. It's like you've been walking down a path, and all of a sudden you finally come across a signpost that points you in a direction for healing or releasing or expressing. It doesn't really matter, but you see a signpost in your soul is just like, yes, that's where we're going. That's the direction we're heading. And so we go that way, and, you know, we're super jazzed, super pumped, or sometimes even just quietly assured, which is also important to recognize that sometimes it's quiet in its own right. But as we walk down this path a little bit, and we notice that the sign post gets further and further behind us, we come across that dark night, or we come across that quiet space where the joy seems to dissipate a little bit. The grace is still, you know, like, we can recognize that happened. That was a cool experience, but my prayers don't seem to be giving me the validation. My conversations don't seem to be giving me the validation. My paycheck doesn't seem to be giving me the validation. All the different things seem to go away. All of the cheering crowds get a little quieter, and you're really left in a sensation where it feels like you're alone. It really gives us the opportunity to remember that we are playing a part in this. Because God isn't here to continuously validate you or to continuously coach you 24/7 nonstop. Because God isn't here to make you do anything. Life isn't here to make you do anything. You have the gift of free will, which is such a beautiful expression of love. Where God says, do what you want. Go right, go left, shit, cut through the woods. And you're allowed to do those things. You're given the opportunity to try those different modalities because you're loved enough to exist as you choose to exist. And that is what the dark night of the soul really brings to our stories. It really brings the opportunity to do some self-reflection and see if you trust yourself. If you trust that you read that sign right, if you trust your soul's joy, or if you trust your ability to discern that was the proper move for you. Because God, like you say, isn't here to tell you that, yep, that's right, nope, that's wrong. You know, there is levels of discernment, and sometimes that is the modality that God chooses to communicate with us. But more often than not, you will find yourself in a position where it's up to you. It's up to you, and you really get the opportunity to see the magnificence of yourself because you get to choose. You get to choose if you want to hold on faith, that was the right direction. You get to choose perhaps that you want to stop and you want to reassess and you want to go through the notebook and through the checklist and see if this still matches with you. Or, you know, you might want to even turn around and go back and reread that signpost and revisit those old ways. Or you might want to just say, screw it, and run through the woods. It doesn't matter. You get to choose how you want to live your life. And you're allowed to do that. That's free will. That's God's love being demonstrated. But a lot of times we don't have the acknowledgement of those quiet spots. If you think of, I'm going to stick in the Bible for a minute. The Bible is divinely inspired. And so a lot of times in the Bible, you find stories where God is inspiring people, whether it's, you know, a lot of different modalities, but there's usually a liberation or a show of power or forgiveness or freedom or, you know, inspiration. And so a lot of the stories in that book show that side of God and show God's greatness, which is what your soul recognizes when it feels joy. Is like, yeah, that's the stuff they write about. But it doesn't always address what comes after that, which is this dark night of the soul, which is the part where God says, okay, I showed you. What do you think about that? What do you think about that, friend? Because I'm not going to make you do anything, but I want to see what you believe. Do you trust yourself, and do you trust God? That's up to you. And there's no right and there's no wrong, because that is a process. That's a maturing process. That's something that every time you're in those positions, you can handle it a little bit differently, or what you perceive as better, or what you perceive as stronger, what you perceive as more grown up. And that is such a enriching part of it, because you really get a chance to relate with yourself as a player within the divine play. You get to choose how you want to do it. And I think that a lot of times we just expect our spiritual lives to be happy-go-lucky, all engines forward, and we forget that this is a part where you're going to be tempted to retreat. It's scary. I just think of even driving down the highway sometimes where I don't see a sign for a while and how I get nervous. And I go for my phone or my GPS, or I get a map out, or, I get nervous. And the same thing happens on a spiritual journey, on a spiritual adventure, where maybe you don't see a signpost for a while. And all you have to rely on is the fact that you believe you read that last sign right. And you have trust that if you didn't, something else will come up and redirect you. But it's a journey to see how you handle your faith and how deeply you believe it. And it has no bearing on your actual relationship with God. If God is quiet, he's giving you an opportunity to shine and an opportunity for you to discern and you to choose where you go. And that shows faith in you from God. That shows that God has faith in you. And that is awesome. And it's just an opportunity for you to develop that within your own self and within your own story. And we do make mistakes. And we do correct them. We do grow and we do learn, and thank God for that. No one's perfect. No one reads the signs right every time. And at the same time, though, no one reads the signs wrong every time. So it's important to remember that too. Destiny isn't fickle enough for you to mess it up. You're supposed to get somewhere. It's just a matter of how you want to get there. Because you'll get there one day. So I just wanted to take a minute with this and just acknowledge that if you find yourself in that space where God is quiet and it feels like all eyes are on you and all the pressure is on you, well, first of all, you're putting that pressure on there. So be nice with yourself. Be gentle with the words and the way that you coach yourself. And just recognize that this is God's chance of showing you that you have a choice as well. That it's not him making you do anything. That you play just as important of a part in this whole thing. And if you find yourself there, I commend you for your bravery, because that is a scary spot. It's a tricky spot. And it's very much important. And it's very much for you to even see deeper that there's something amazing going on. There's something magnificent happening here. And that's the heart of the matter, guys. I love you very much.